Alan Menken and Glenn Slater are the songwriting team behind Spellbound on Netflix. I'm David Buchanan with Gold Derby. I want to start with a question for both of you, which is you're obviously no stranger to animated films and to fairy tales in particular. What was it about Spellbound that really felt unique and compelled you to join the project? Let's start with you, Alan.
Well, to be honest, the number one bait was number one, working with John Lasseter again and working with Chris Montan again and having another project with Glenn, of course. That's what got me into the room.
But I think what was really exciting for both of us was that, well, this has the form of a fairy tale story. It's actually a much bigger story than your typical fairy tale. It's an allegory for a family dynamic that many families go through. It's a big emotional story. It's something that I think will resonate with audiences. And while it's told as a fairy tale, it has a lot more on its mind.
And it was that first meeting, however, afterwards, it was exciting and terrifying at the same time because it defied a formulaic approach.
And that kind of challenge is sort of, you can't turn that down.
Yeah, I want to dive into the kind of emotional heft of the film, but I also want to ask you first about your process. This is obviously not the first time you've collaborated together. Take us behind the scenes of that. Where do you start? Glenn, do you start with the lyrics and hand them off to Alan? Alan, are you giving him melodies? What does your collaboration look like?
It always starts with conversation. We work very closely with the filmmakers, and we came onto this project right at the beginning. So we were in the story process from the inception almost. But once we're on our own writing the songs, we sit at Alan's piano and we just talk. We talk about the characters. We talk about the character's arc. We talk about other musical feels that might relate to the character. We talk about where the song fits in the score and how we want to, how we want to take that nucleus and expand it outwards. We talk about the scene and where the scene begins and ends. And then once we've talked it through, we'll sit together at Alan's piano. I'll sometimes have a title in mind or maybe a line. And I feed that to Alan and he just kind of runs with it.
Well, I'm going to move the lens out. I look for the overall, what is the musical world of this story? Where's a unique musical world of this story so that it has its own unique life? And that was a real challenge. And that came, it took years in a way for us to feel our way around this sort of a blind man feeling an elephant, right?
Yeah.
But I know the first song that we wrote, which I think helped define the vocabulary, was the song that became My Parents Are Monsters. It contains so many different stylistic elements in it, and in a way, those threads really are what defined what followed. But yeah, it doesn't have the architecture of a normal, oh, here's the problem, here's what I want, how am I going to get to what I want, and the happy ending, and it wasn't in there. This is a real life.
And unlike many other animated films, this is set in a fantasy world that doesn't really have a correlation to a real life place. So, it's not as if we could say, well, this is a French sounding score or an Italian sounding score, or this sounds like Motown or whatever. We kind of wanted to make it feel like its own place. And so we used bits and pieces from lots of different cultures. There's a little bit of Spanish feel, and there's a little bit of a Brazilian feel, and a little bit of a kind of an Indian Bollywood feel. Like there's little bits that we've kind of cobbled together into a unique feel. And that all goes into the cauldron when we sit down. Alan will start, we will talk, and we'll have a kind of a specific word idea of what we want it to be, and then Alan will start playing. And often, because he's Alan Menken, he will nail the melody immediately, the melody that says, like if you say, oh, well, this is a girl who is hopeful yet sad, and it's not a sad sadness, it's a lonely kind of sadness, but she's brave. And he'll be like, oh, like this. And he'll play something like, yes, exactly like that.
By the way, you said, he said we sit at the piano. Now, I have Glenn sitting over there because Glenn gets he'll practically be throwing things in the room out of frustration sometimes. I mean, we're opposites that way.
But once he starts playing, I can say to him, okay, that's the feeling. I need a little bit more space here in the verse because I have a big idea I'm trying to get across. Or can we go up here rather than down because I want her to feel like we're launching into the thought rather than. And Alan will likewise say, yeah, okay, can I change this here because it doesn't feel right musically, or I wanna have this open feel here. Can you give me lyrics that will match that? And he'll come up with a full demo, which I will then take home and fill in a lyric behind that. And again, he's the master at taking an emotion and making it concrete in music. And so
then
once I have all that emotion, I kind of, with the words, I kind of shape it and form it a little bit and give it a little bit more context. And then I bring it back to him. And then the next phase of collaboration where he says, can we cut this line? Can we, this ending isn't big enough. Can we create a bigger ending? I want to add these instruments, and can you match that? So it's a lot of back and forth.
And then once it's done, the next collaboration comes in, which we share it with the team, and we get back
feedback.
I don't know, or I love it's.
Can we hear more from this character?
Because yeah,
that kind of a thing.
In this process, everybody was struggling with. I mean, John. I think was it John who came up with a basic idea of this emotional. Not even well, it is a journey, but it explores this really complex and important emotion, and everyone had their different ways of impulses of how to take that journey further.
So this was not a linear process, and no project is linear, but this was less linear than most. There was a lot of rethinking and going back and new ideas coming in that changed things completely, and everybody had to be very fluid and very adaptive, and luckily we had a team where everybody trusted each other, and we had all mostly worked together before, so we were able to sort of go on that journey, hold hands, swallow hard, and dive into the unknown.
Let's dive into one of the, I think, emotional hearts of the film, which is that song, The Way It Was Before, which is so beautiful, so beautifully crafted, and so important to the kind of emotional arc and the story arc. What was the inspiration for that in particular? And what does it feel like to hand it off to a really spectacular artist like Rachel Zegler, who just brings it to a whole nother level? It's so beautifully performed.
Rachel, wonderful. I had been seeing Rachel on YouTube, which was a little girl singing songs of Little Mermaid or other things. She's wonderful and so talented, and it's perfect for the role. As far as the emotional architecture of that song, I think what best encapsulates is sort of what's in the film, which is you have this drip of water hitting a broken piano, and the song sort of comes out of that broken place.
One of the things we kept saying was that it looks like a fairy tale, it feels like a fairy tale, but this is not a fairy tale. This is real life. And what we were doing often, we're taking fairy tale tropes and turning them a little bit inside out. And this song is one of those examples. It feels like and sounds like your typical I Want song, but what she wants is something she will never be able to get, that there's nothing she can do that can get it, and that it's not necessarily even something that she really should want. And so we're able to use sort of the conventions that we know so well, and that Alan is so instrumental in actually sort of cementing in the popular imagination, and both give it to the audience and turn it in such a way that it becomes a more complex thing.
One of my favorite rhymes comes in the song I Could Get Used to This, performed by John Lithgow. What a great voice cast you have on this film. And that's marvelous and larvalous. I had to ask you, what is your, if it's not that one.
Yes. Yes, as I'm moldering in the grave, it will say larvalous.
If it's not that one, what is your favorite lyric in the film?
I love the one that goes, I can get used to this. I shake that caboose to this.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of fun with that particular song. And, also the song Step by Step, which is sort of a flamenco number. And again, it looks like and feels like a villain song, except these aren't villains. And what they want to do is actually helpful for our heroine. So an unusual, but Alan wrote this great snaky flamenco melody to it that gave me so many opportunities for interesting rhythms and clever rhymes. And, you know, it's always fun being able to sort of sink your teeth into that and seeing what you can do.
You mentioned earlier that this film is really a real life story. It has a real kind of emotional grounding that I think a lot of people will recognize and relate to. I wanted to ask too, what do you think about the role of songwriting in reaching younger audiences with these really kind of powerful and challenging, you know, emotional realities that they might face?
Songs are one of the, if not the most, one of the most powerful mediums for emotion. I think for me, a song is, I hate to use this word, trumped by the score itself, the overall world of the music in an entire story. So the song is really contextualized. I think musicals, especially for this generation, have become enormously powerful for this generation. It amazes me how much it's been embraced as an incredible form. But it always has been, but it's more diverse and more, I think, more powerful than ever.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really see this as a children's genre. You know, we see this as a musical, the way you would see a Broadway show as a musical. And, you know, and this is also something that Alan and Howard kind of set the template for. You know, we don't write down to children. We write up.
Well, we write to the child in us.
Yeah,
basically.
but we assume that children are smart enough and savvy enough to get what we're trying to do. That being said, we also, with this particular film, felt like we had a responsibility to children in the audience because it really is a story that affects a lot of children, and we felt like we needed to make sure that that we were honoring their emotions, that we were not giving them expectations of a hero's journey in this particular setting that they themselves would not be able to match in real life. That we were not over promising, and that psychologically we were following what the literature and what psychologists have found to be this is the path that children follow, and this is the way parents need to be reacting within that world. You know, and not changing that to fit what would be more exciting for an audience or what would be make a better story. The psychological story here was the centerpiece, and we felt that we had that responsibility for the children.
Also, totally. When Howard and I wrote Little Shop of Horrors, I thought, oh God, you know, kids are not gonna be able to come to this. I mean, it's basically a plant that's eating people. We have blood and we have murders. I mean, he thought deliberate murder. He left himself to death. But in any case, and of course that wasn't true. And Little Shop actually became the Rosetta Stone for Little Mermaid, and we're followed. So we baked in the sophistication of these off-Broadway musicals of the early '80s into what became Disney. And everybody at Disney, by the way, when Mike they all came out of theater. Peter Schneider, who's head of animation, had been company manager on Little Shop. Michael Eisner was a theater major in college. It's just, you know, it was this amazing birthplace that brought us to this. And I think, you know, this is the latest iteration of it in Spellbound.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is to create something that feels timeless and that works for everybody, and will be working for everybody for the next, 100 years.
Knock on wood.
Knock on wood.
Ellen Menken and Glenn Slater, congratulations on Spellbound. Thank you so much for talking to Gold Derby today.